Hey everybody, it's Robert Dunt from arttop10.com and I'm very excited to be chatting to Natalie Dowse.
Hello Rob, good morning, nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you, very nice to meet you. So, you are in your studio, so you haven't been turfed out of it during lockdown, you are actually managed to be...
I am actually in my studio because my studio is at home. So, yeah, I've been working, it's the conservatory at the back of the flat. So I've been working from home for about the last 3 years.
Okay.
Before that, I always had much larger studios with Artspace Portsmouth,
Okay.
but gave that up because I spent best part of a year or two with going back and forth to France with Phil to help with his building project.
Nice.
So yeah, so I've been working here for about 3 years. It has some benefits right now, where everything's at home, but there are some disadvantages as well. I miss having more space. It's quite small.
Yeah, go on, show, give us a little tour.
Yeah, okay. So there, you can see the window. I've got about, I don't know, 3 meter long working wall, which is not bad.
Not bad.
And then we're stacked up around to cupboards.
Yeah.
I won't show you the other side because it's stacked up with tools at the moment.
Yeah.
But it's manageable. I don't normally. I've put a few things out for the benefit of this video, but normally there's sort of 1 or 2 pieces out. So I work on an easel on the wall because of splashing and so on.
So show us. Is there a piece you're working on at the moment?
Yeah. So the pieces behind, so you can see 2 on the easel there, 2 above there, and 1 large one behind. They're my lockdown paintings.
Okay. And are they different to how you normally paint?
Not different to how I normally paint, but it's a different series. Okay. So I often work in series, and I think a lot of them have links between them.
Okay.
So this large painting, this is the first time anyone's ever seen this because it's unfinished. There's not too much left to do. I don't know if you can make it out, but it's got, I could probably go a little bit closer, but you could see that there's a net. I don't know if you can see that there.
Yeah, we can see
that there's a sort of a net shape in there. So that's on the go. The top one on the easel is not finished. The other 3 are. Okay. So my intention was to continue with, so I'm just plugging the computer back in, to continue with a series that I'm making called Between Dog and Wolf. And that was my intention. But I had this other series in mind, and I think probably it might just be a little bit of escapism whilst we're in this situation. So yeah, I've made a start with this.
It's cool. So the net and the sea, is that like from a photo you took, or
yeah? So that one's a combination. So I work from photographs or maybe film stills. They can be photographs that I've taken myself. They may be, as I say, taken from a film still, or they may be that they've been taken from the internet. Okay. So the paintings of above, of the looking out at the sea there, they're taken from photographs. Actually, a friend has taken the photographs for me. Okay. I've got a friend who goes sea swimming most year round. Wow. Too cold for me.
No way.
And he's got a waterproof phone with this camera on it. So he's been taking some pictures for me because I wanted some photographs of being actually in the water from that very specific viewpoint. I mean, I can send you some JPEGs later if you can't really see what's going on with those. Yeah. So the idea that you are actually in the water, so a very specific viewpoint, which I think links to a series that I've made in the past, the Road series. I've just got one here because I had it in the flat, happened to have it in the flat. All my work's mainly in storage. Okay. But there's one that I just had in the house. So again, from the perspective of the car, so driving in the car, so putting the viewer really central into the view, but also the activity, if you like. and I think, you know, kind of taps on ideas of shared experience, and can bring up quite interesting dialogues about narrative, you know, the response that I sometimes get from people looking at the work. You know, a lot of people have shared that experience of maybe driving down a road,
exactly,
perhaps getting towards dusk or early in the morning, and it's isolated, and people convinced that they know where that road is, and I never say where the roads are. So it's interesting that sometimes viewers are very convinced that they know where that road is because of experience that obviously they're tapping into some memory or something. So sorry, I'm going on a bit.
no, go on, that's cool. I was just curious, like you said, isolation, they all feel a bit isolated, but in an odd way, not in a kind of warm way. A friendly isolation, not lonely, strangely.
I think one of the things about my work that happens is there's sort of like a beauty or you know, the initial look of something, but sometimes I feel there's a feeling that there's more to it than meets the eye. You know, there's a very subtle sort of uncanniness or unease about some of them. So I don't know if you've had a chance to look through my work on the website, but as I say, there's this series called Between Dog and Wolf, and they're sort of nocturne paintings. It's from a well-known French saying, and it's that time of day, I suppose, just after gloaming, but when it's still dusk and going into nightfall, and the idea that things become shadowy, so it would be very difficult to tell the difference between a dog and a wolf. So it's something maybe friendly, something that you may perceive as dangerous, and they're taken from the perspective. It was in France actually. It's a very wooded lane, and I took photographs. I actually stood between, there's a very, very strong light source, and I stood between the headlamps of the car. So I actually had to get out of the car to be able to take the photographs. And I think obviously, even though it was that time of dusk, as soon as you start walking into a very wooded area where there's no light pollution, you know, it becomes very dark. And I think they have quite a filmic look about them, and I think that works quite well when I work in series. I can't seem to just think, I'm going to make one painting. I end up making a lot of paintings in the same series, and it's almost like it reminds me of different film stills, if you like.
Excellent. So Natalie, so we can see the Between Dog and Wolf pictures. So tell me a bit more about them again. You were standing in between the car headlights.
So to collect this source material, this is in central France, in the middle of nowhere.
Okay.
And it's totally irrelevant where that is, but to get these photographs, I drove a car down this lane. Okay. But I got out of the car and stood between the headlamps of the car to get the material. Took this whole series of photographs, of which I have hundreds and hundreds of different source material. So this was the series that I thought I'd be carrying on with during lockdown, but obviously I've started something else. Maybe I wanted something a little bit lighter.
I think
cheerful.
Did you write these in the middle of the night, or?
They're just at dusk. So between the dog and the wolf, you know, that time where things become shadowy. But of course, as soon as you walk into the woods, you know, obviously I think you can see a hint from the slight blueness still in the sky.
Yeah, you can, exactly.
You know, but obviously the light changes very quickly. So I can scroll through. There's a few of these. Nice,
I like that one.
Yeah, this one actually. Is it this one? This one's actually in exhibition at the moment, but obviously nobody can see it, which is a bit of a shame. But the reason I mention that is that it's it's been exhibited at Derby Art Gallery Museum.
Okay, nice.
And they've got a big Joseph Wright collection. Okay. And they've hung this painting in the Joseph Wright room, which I'm really quite pleased about.
Yeah, no,
because
it, really good.
you know, his work with that, you know, with the light and the dark, and you know, that extreme light. So I'm really chuffed about that. But obviously the exhibition is now closed. It's been extended till September, but
well, there we go.
I don't know if anyone will be able to see it then either. Just scroll down. So yeah, this one's Between Dog and Wolf, Memento Mori. I think you can, there's just, if you look, I don't know if you can see my mouse moving on here.
Yeah, I can.
So in this area here, things become quite mysterious, and it was quite hard from the source material to see what was going on there. I think it's the roots of a tree, but it very much looked like a skull in
like a skull, doesn't it?
the photograph, and painted it, and I thought, should I make it look less like a skull?
Yeah, it's tricky.
You know, I quite like that. You know, some people don't notice it's there, but kind of like that sort of shift between what would be the familiar in daylight to maybe the unfamiliar in the dark. You know, that whole thing of, it was interesting actually. I showed someone some of these paintings, and the first reaction, I thought this was wonderful, said, has there been a murder?
Oh, right.
You know, this kind of, I suppose because it's filmic and sort of headlamps in the dark is used quite often in films and narrative, and how we're all maybe a little bit scared of the dark.
It's interesting. I still find them, even though they're scary, they don't, which they could do, they don't feel bleak. They don't feel, they're not depressing, strangely enough. They're quite positive, and it's almost like the night is quite exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's subtle, and it's not necessarily my intention to make them foreboding. You know, and I like that, I don't know, that sort of dichotomy, if you like, that little uncertainty about it. At first glance, they do look quite jolly and friendly and inviting to me.
I think they do feel quite inviting.
Yeah.
But
so
interesting.
Yeah, so this series, there's 4 of them at the moment.
Oh yeah, that's
but this is something that, you know, I will continue. I dip in and out of things, but as I say, I think they've all got a connection.
Of all your series, always had this sort of element of an unknown thing about to take place, or sort of
no, not all of it. It's so, how can I say, I think some of my work's landscape based. Some of the work will be, say, a landscape with people in it. And some of it is loosely portraiture. So there's some things that haven't maybe got this feeling. Let me just probably let me show you something. I'll show you crocodile tears. Let me just show you that. So the internet's being a little slow. Let's see if it'll catch up. There we go. Here we go.
Oh, wow. Quite different.
So this is a series of work I made that are based on film stills. And I've zoomed in, you know, done an ultra close-up shot. So probably, or possibly, or maybe hopefully, the actor becomes anonymous. So these are all from films where obviously the actor is crying, hence the crocodile tears. So I watch quite a lot of films, and it was a case of every time I saw someone crying in a film, I'd sort of stop the film, I'd turn all the lights off, get my camera out, take photographs from the screen. And if anyone's ever taken photographs from a screen, you know, you get a lot of interference and lines and moire patterns and so on. So then the paintings are, you know, so it's quite fuzzy material, if you like. But I quite enjoyed that. And then it's obviously zoomed quite tight into the actor's face.
Oh, really cool.
So I've just flicked through these. So this is just obviously an example of a slightly different series of work.
No.
There's another series called Cuts, which is the same principle that that actors of quite often when they're cutting a film have a nice placed cut, it just in the right place, you know, and how that, you know, there's a contradiction there between it being, you know, an injury and an actor and makeup, and, you know, a bit of a cliche that it's, you know, quite often placed in a very nice
nice spot.
visible place
It's
on the face.
It's interesting because technically you're very good at painting, aren't you?
Well,
which is interesting because almost the question you then got to deal with is what are you going to paint?
Well, it's very nice of you to say that, I must say, because I've been painting or trying to paint for many, many years, and I still find it incredibly difficult and challenging, and I beat myself up about it, so it's very nice to hear you say that.
Oh man, I can't believe that because they look wonderful.
There was a lovely thing, I watched Nabi Price's interview. I love his work, and I can't remember what phrase he used about, I think it was some sort of luxurious dilemma or something. And I really love his work, and I love, I'm very interested in strong concepts behind paintings, and you know, I think he's got a fabulous idea behind his work, and where the source material comes from, and how they often look quite banal, but, you know, there's a real story behind those. So
you have to share a little link in that way, don't you, mate?
But it's very nice of you, getting back to technique. It's very nice of you to say that, because, you know, I still feel I struggle with the wet stuff even after all these years.
Man,
So yeah.
So go on. Is there one more series you'll show us?
Along these lines, or
anything else you think? Because it's just quite interesting to see the diverse. Diverse, but not diverse, which is cool.
Yeah, so I mean, I can't always verbalise that, but I quite often feel that there's links, you know, between series, and it might be something I return to, and then you think, oh, okay, that links back to that, or that links to that. Hang on a minute, I'm messing around here. Let's just move that.
It's quite interesting. Even these eyes, I mean, they're not actually so different to the woods or the sea in a way. I mean, it's almost like these could be the people in the sea or in the woods. It's when I was chatting to Judith Tucker, we were chatting about the different way you're looking. So when you're in the sea, it's obviously somebody in the sea or something in the sea looking out. But then, like here, we're looking at the people. Oh, that's quite freaky. Oh, that's the cut. That's cool.
Yeah, so these are the cut ones. I did these before the crocodile tears ones, and I hadn't zoomed in so much into the protagonist. And so you know, the crocodile tears came later, and I really wanted to actually get in really close so that the identity of the actor or person wasn't known.
It's really
and then I'll just show you an example where I think, if you don't mind me
no, go for it
going on a bit, but so for example, let's go back to Little Girls in Pretty Boxes. So this was a whole series made quite some time ago, and they're all based on Eastern Bloc gymnasts.
Oh wow.
So Olga Korbut, Nadia Comaneci. And again, I took the images from old footage. You could get, at the time, I managed to get like an old video recording, say, but now obviously you can see a lot of stuff like this on YouTube. So they're all these gymnasts from the 1970s, 80s. I used to do gymnastics myself, and I was always aware of these gymnasts because there were posters on the walls.
Oh no, I remember them as well.
Yeah, and I think the sport became popular, but
it did.
You know, the idea that there's sort of like a bit of a sadness behind it, really. You know, with the fact that these are young women at that time, particularly looking, you know, like children pubescent when they're like 17,
Yeah.
18, and so on. And you know, I can go on about gymnastics in a very boring way for a long time, so I won't. But I suppose for these paintings, they're all from the perspective of in between performances, if you like. So that fleeting moment between, you know, coming off the podium or winning a medal, just pensive. But I think recently I think this was some light relief. This series was let me just move that again. So we've got Park Life, and I think that there's not many in I did this fairly recently. As I say, I now and again I really have the urge to paint people. And you know, I think this has got that same moment. So this was me being a voyeur in the local park, you know, with my phone and zooming in. I like this one because it's called Shark in the Park.
It's really cool, actually.
And actually, I think when I had it on my phone, I think it's my phone or Facebook or something, tried to categorise it, and it categorised it as a fish tank, which I thought was really good. So, you know, woman with mobile phone, etc., man in the park. But this is a park that I've been walking around every day whilst we've been in lockdown. It's 5 minutes down the road. But these paintings were from last year. But I think they've got that connection almost with the gymnast pieces. What else can I show you?
I think they're all actually quite connected.
So these are the road paintings.
That's the roads.
Talking about. So again, perspective of driving, or actually the passenger.
I like the car. That's a really good one. They're really cool.
Quickly click through those.
Really good. They're really good. They are very memorable of driving around, actually.
So then I suppose what I could talk about briefly, unless you want to. Sorry, I'm taking over. I didn't mean to.
No, that's cool. That's cool.
So the Song of the Siren pieces I've got 4 of them up here on the website from last week. Obviously there's the one behind me. Am I still visible? I don't know.
No, you are. Should we
which is an extension of that. So
let's go back. Stop sharing and go back to the studios. These ones are cool in the life.
So these are loosely based on the Greek myth of the siren, luring sailors to their death. Which is lovely.
But you know what? That could almost fit all those different works, couldn't it? The myth of the siren. They could all be sirens. The gymnasts could be sirens. The crying people are like sirens. The roads have got a siren-y pull. That's quite freaky.
Actually, when you were talking about the crocodile tears ones, it just, that thought went through my mind just now. You know, I do enjoy those connections that seem to happen. So, and it's also, you know, it's loosely based on, there's a song called Song to the Siren, which is a Bill Buckley song originally, but it was covered by this Mortal Coil, which was a band made up of band members that were on the record label, I think 4AD or something. So I've known that song for a long time. It's Liz Fraser singing it from the Cocteau Twins. And I don't normally make work based on songs. It's only loosely, say, based on that. So it must have been about 6-7 years ago. I had the lyrics of that song on my studio wall, and I never really did anything with it, but I just sort of found it quite melancholy and gothic way. And so that's when I started to think about, you know, these images. And then I obviously, the friend that goes swimming, I should do it myself really, but I've always, nearly always lived on the coast, and I love being near water, but I'm actually quite scared of water. I'm not a water baby. I'm not a strong swimmer. So to me, it's always something that's beautiful and dangerous. And I think that, I suppose that's what I think perhaps in my work, that there's the familiar and the unfamiliar, there's some comfort but maybe some danger. So
I mean, I'm obsessed with the siren thing now, but beauty and danger would be the siren as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So you know, the idea that they have this beautiful song and they're luring sailors to the rocks to shipwreck, and then obviously some interpretations of that is then luring them to swim and fall in love. But if they fall in love and touch the siren, they fall in love and go under the water and drown. But then I was thinking about the one with the net. That's based on the idea of ghost nets, which is pollution in the sea. So it's cast off fishermen's nets that don't break down, and the oceans are full of them. And so they can get caught up on coral reefs or rocks, or floating around, you know, in the open ocean, but are sort of dangerous to sea life. So a lot of dolphins, turtles, sharks, all sorts get caught up in them, and obviously quite often die. And this, you know, obviously a lot of these nets are synthetic, so they don't break down. But I was thinking about them and thinking that when I started drawing them, I had one of these just one of these nets that you get your tangerine. I don't know if you can see that. Hang on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, bring it over.
Just a net that you get your oranges in. So we're making like drawings of these, and how I thought they started to look like sort of, they're called ghost nets, but ghosts and bodies. And in the context of them being dangerous.
Oh, is that a drawing on the wall behind you?
Sorry?
Is that a little drawing?
Yeah, there's a drawing. Yeah, so I started sketching in my sketchbook.
Yeah.
So I've got sort of quite a few of these sort of drawings that I've made.
Very nice.
And then, so with this is unfinished, so I need to get on with this.
Okay.
But this idea, obviously, this is under the water. But sometimes in the past, I've spliced different images together. So this will be a case of, you know, I've sourced, you know, some imagery from the internet. I've tampered around with it, and then I'm putting in, you know, parts of my own drawing, things like that. So, yeah, maybe this, you know, net is another siren. You know?
Exactly. Sucked up water. But it is quite. I mean, it does almost look a bit like an alien, the net, sort of glowing alien.
Yeah, almost like an alien, or it definitely feels like a being of some description, though. And I think, we'll see how it goes. I want to try and knock that net back a little bit more. I know it's not that visible, but I want it to be less visible. So I've just got to work with that. So I'll just be using like glazes on that now to knock that back and see how far to push that. So
actually, talking about the glazes, what sort of mediums and paints and things do you use?
Okay, so paints I use, I really like Lucas brand, so I use Lucas paints. I've got a whole box of them there.
And they're oil ones, are they?
Oil, yeah. And as you were listening to, again, I've listened to all the interviews that you've done, and I was listening to the brilliant one with Paula MacArthur. She's talking about how dangerous and mixes of flammable materials in the early days. And also Judith touched on materials, and I note that they both had some really nice like Harding paint.
Yeah, Michael Harding.
And every time I see someone talking about paint like that, I always think, okay, when you're going to go and buy your ultra professional paints? But unfortunately, I can't afford them.
They're just.
But I find the Lucas brand. I feel that like the colours are really punchy, and also the consistency of them. I quite like quite a wet paint, and I find that they really suit me.
I don't think it matters at the end of the day, does it? I mean,
no, I think I know. It's just one of those things you think.
Oh no! I mean, I feel just the same. You look at those Michael Harding things and think, I should be using those. I mean, it's like it's too expensive, isn't it?
Yeah. I think Lucas are really reasonable, but I think out of that type of paint, I think they're really good. I don't get shares from them, by the way. And then I usually use Sansador. which is in short supply at the moment. Been trying to get some because it's low odour. Two things. I'm asthmatic, so I find it quite difficult. I have to be quite careful with the solvents. And also I work from home, so that's another reason. And same for...
absolutely the same. I work in a little room here, and because I do large paintings, sometimes it's just dreadful. So I've had to buy a giant extractor to suck out into the street.
I mean, normally I've got an extractor going. I've got a fan in here because it's very hot at the moment, but I didn't want to run it while I'm talking to you because you won't be able to hear me. So for glaze, I quite often I work in layers. I build up in layers, so I do an underpainting. I work from photographs. I do I grid up the image and then I grid up the canvas, but I don't paint square by square like some people would maybe get that real photorealism. I just use that to plot it in, and then after that the grid goes. And I build up in layers, and I use quite a lot of glazes, especially for the darker paintings. But for that I use liquid because again, even when I'm using liquid, it actually makes my eyes strain.
Oh man, they're all horrible, aren't they? All these things.
But if I have used other glazing mediums, and they are so potent, I just can't cope. So I find liquid works quite well, and I've just got to cope with a few tears whilst I'm painting. And I try and control it. I try and only put out what I need. But I can't. I'd love to be able to get on well with acrylic paints, but I just don't. So I find it, for the way that I paint, it just doesn't stay wet enough.
I can't get on with acrylics either for some unknown reason. It just doesn't work. It's not fun. What about, have you used Damar varnish and stand oil and terps and stuff for a glazing medium?
I have had some experiments of mixing up my own glazes and all sorts of things. Along the way, I've had some disasters. So I tend to buy ready mixed mediums. I think I had a painting once that I made such a mess of it, it never dried.
Oh wow.
I think I got my mixture wrong. So I tend to buy ready-made mediums. I'm not very experimental in that way.
As long as you make it work. No, what sort of brushes? Just any old normal ones?
Well, I really like using. I tend to use a lot of brushes that are for acrylic painting. So really soft. Like I think these might even just be like a small one, system-free brush. They're very soft and synthetic, and I prefer that. The only thing is, because they are really for acrylic painting, I wear them down very quickly. But it's quite good because then they've got different uses through their life, because when there's sometimes a little stump, I think they're really good for rubbing and scratching in, or with it just the stump. And then other times, so they're in I buy them periodically, so they're in different states.
They're in different
full brush, half brush, and a stumpy brush, but they're all useful.
That's really cool.
But I just find, I've got stiffer brushes there, that you might use for oil, and I just prefer a softer brush.
Absolutely. I've all sorts of different brushes. Some of them are the hog hair, and some are just like those acrylic brushes. Almost like watercolor brushes. It's just sort of whatever you want to get out of it.
I think so. I just think you have to find out what works for you, and go from there, and just happen to, like incredibly soft brushes. I do quite a lot of blending and thin layers and so on. I think if I was trying to use more impasto paint, you'd probably want a bit of a meatier brush or something, that can manage that. But no, it's nice to talk about brushes and materials, isn't it? It's interesting to us painters, but probably nobody else.
Well, no, I think it's absolutely fascinating. I think when people start oil painting, they see it as a deep trauma, don't they? they don't think of just getting a jar of turps and just painting with it. It's like, oh, oil painting, it's such a big drama. But I mean, it's not really. And like us, we have all these weird different ways of doing it. So I mean, there's no set method.
Yeah, I mean, you just find your way, don't you?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's, for me, and like I said at the very beginning, you know, I think it's something that I've always struggled with. But over the years, you know, I have found my own methods of doing things, and I suppose that you know, it's like that for some people. I think back to my degree course, I spent 3 years, say, trying to paint. 3 years painting, and my final degree show didn't have one single painting in it. Sorry, there's a motorbike outside. Can you repeat that?
What was in the degree show? What did you have in
so I ended up making really massive charcoal drawings with compressed charcoal. So I was doing quite a lot of work around the body and movement and dance, and they ended up, one of them I think was about 12 foot long. I used a roll of paper. So they were a combination of like drawing around myself and bodies that looked like they were falling in black space, or they've been caught
by the siren, hadn't they?
Yeah. I mean, I have got some very poor back in those days when you had to make slides. I've got some slides of these that possibly maybe good to look at, I don't know, but and then I would stand in chalk dust or safe earth pigments, the safe ones, not cadmium red, and stand in them and dance across it.
Oh wow.
And then I had photographs in a video as well. I just remember my tutor freaking out when I suddenly said I was going to make a video, because he was a painter's painter. I was like, oh, a video? You can't do that. So in my painting show, I didn't have any painting.
That's great.
That's how hard I've always found painting.
Well, they do look brilliant. I think they are really cool. And I've absolutely loved chatting. I'm totally obsessed with the siren thread.
Yeah, thank you.
But no, they're really cool. They're really cool pictures, and I'm looking forward to seeing them in the flesh.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for inviting me.
No, it's been lovely. It's been absolutely fantastic to chat. And
great.
So, thank you very much, Natalie.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bumbuckler.